Good afternoon and welcome to the talent pillar of Invest Midlands. I'm Ben Ormsby, one of the editors at thebusinessdesk.com, and over the next hour and a half, we're going to look at the changes to the way we work and how they're impacting the future of businesses, from the rise of employee ownership trusts to how the physical spaces which we inhabit are going to be transformed. So, before we get started, a quick bit of housekeeping. Please do ask questions in the chat, and we will put them to our panel of experts. And feel free to engage with us also on social media. So let's get cracking. I'd like to welcome my panel to the stage. And before we get started, this discussion is going to focus on how the pandemic's changed the way in which we work forever, how the rise of remote and hybrid working becoming the norm has maybe impacted what we think of for the traditional office space. So now the panel here, I'm going to ask them to each introduce themselves, starting with Faye, please.
Hi, good afternoon, everybody. So, my name's Faye Summers. I'm the HR director at UK Flooring Direct, which is a leading Midlands-based online flooring retailer. So we predominantly sell a range of products across hard flooring, carpets. We're based across East Midlands, West Midlands, and my role at UK Flooring Direct as HR director is to ultimately drive the people agenda and the people strategy. So nice to be on board this panel.
Fantastic. Next, I'll go to Rob, please.
Hi everybody. My name's Rob Groves. I'm Regional Director for MEPC, and I head up the Midlands office in Birmingham. And I'm currently lead on the Paradise project, which is the city centre development next to the council house, just over a couple of million square feet.
Fantastic. And last but not least, Habiba.
Thanks, Ben. Hi, I'm Habiba. I look after the Midlands region for Robert Walters.
Fantastic. Right, so let's get started. And probably the first question is going to be to you, Habiba and Faye, that there's been a lot made of the rise of hybrid working. Are you seeing that demand come from employees and candidates, I guess? So let's start. We'll start where we ended. So we'll start with Habiba first.
Yeah, I think absolutely yes. I would say there's been a real shift in the hybrid working conversation over the last couple of years. And Faye, I don't know if you'll agree with this, but if I think about the candidates and the businesses that we're working with in the Midlands, what would have been a deal breaker pre-pandemic around agile working has now become a given. So it's gone from being a demand to almost an expectation that there'll be some element of flexible working. And if anything, I'd say that the businesses that we're working with, those that expect their employees to be in 9 to 5 and 5 days a week from the office, they're very much in the minority. And I suppose actually one other thing that shifted a lot probably over the last 12 months in particular is when we've noticed that conversation was around with the businesses we're working with. It was very much around how do we make sure productivity doesn't dip when we've got staff working from home, to now, because I think organically it's worked, that they've managed to find agile working setups that work for them. The conversation's kind of gone to the other end of the spectrum around how do we make sure that we're maintaining inclusion? How are we keeping the culture of the team spirit alive on the days that they're not working from home? So yeah, for us, it's gone from being a demand, I would say, to almost a given.
Fantastic. Yeah. I guess similar question to you, Faye. Are you seeing that demand coming from your employees?
Yeah, absolutely. I was just going to say, following on from what Habiba said, so we have varied roles within the business. So for some of the roles, it is on site, and it's more operational, and that's a given. But for a lot of our roles that are maybe more predominantly office based, in that tech, digital, creative space, we're absolutely seeing that it's almost a given. Whereas we talked about flexibility years ago, now it's almost that. An absolute given if it's not a fully remote role, that it's what does that hybrid look like, and so we're definitely finding that. We also had about 85% of the business 2 years ago, literally 2 years ago, that went and worked remote completely, and what we're looking at now is how do we come out of that complete remote working into a hybrid option, and what does that look like? What we're seeing at UK Flooring Direct is that we've got a number of people that work remote, want to come on site, but we're trying to kind of understand, and I know we'll talk about it a little bit more. What does that look like in terms of that office working, including, the spaces that we're working in? What does that mean in terms of connections? And so we're really having to think about what does that mean and how do we execute that? But it's absolutely now in terms of a demand for it. Yeah, we're seeing that both from a candidate perspective and from our current employees that maybe pre-pandemic didn't work from home at all.
So Faye teed me up nicely there, Rob, and you to sort of go on to if everyone's starting to think about working from home, you're building big office spaces. You talked about the size of the Paradise scheme in Birmingham. Are you seeing a change in the demand from occupiers in what they're looking for?
I've seen that people there is a change in demand, but having said that, we have signed up a lot of lettings during the pandemic. And I wanted to pick up a couple of things actually. One, I think there's some confusion. I must admit, I always look at hybrid working as actually being hybrid meetings, which are those challenging meetings where you've got a mixture of people in the real space and then people trying to call in. Personally, all the technology in the world, I find there's a real struggle, and everyone I speak to finds a struggle. I think what's actually the rest of it's all about what Habiba said, which is agile working and flexi working. I think what's actually happened during the pandemic is what was already happening in many informed businesses is accelerated massively. And that is the fact that, I came from an organization that was very rigid in their hours, not the current business I worked in, but it was 9 till 6. Now, that was way behind the times. A lot of switched on businesses were already looking at that whole flexible working operation. And one of our tenants, I'm sure you guys will know, is PwC, were already there. And so they were already operating that model of flexible working, coming in different times of the day. Sometimes they might be in 2 or 3 days a week. So I think what the pandemic has done is accelerated it. Picking up on your point, Ben, though, what's happened during the 2 years, there's been some massive, massive exaggeration. UK is probably the world leader in exaggerating the impacts of these things, particularly the press. And what we got to a situation 18 months ago was a situation where the office is dead. The office is dead. And we could see the fact that we're still talking to tenants. And some businesses overreacted at that point in time and said, right, we now need, if we're going to do new office, we're going to really shrink our requirements. No one's going to come into the office anymore. What there's been during the various opening up of the economy is a recognition, actually, you still do need the office space, but it needs to be different. It needs to be a place that's attractive for people to come and collaborate. It needs to have all the social interaction, which you cannot get at home. It needs to have all the facilities in the space, but also it needs to have great things outside within the city and the town, because that's what brings people in. So it's the office workplace in some businesses were already there. Some tenants who are switched on were ahead of the game. A lot of businesses need to play a lot of catch up, but equally, a lot of businesses have overreacted. And some of our tenants that overreacted, driven by their property team during the pandemic, are now coming back into the workplace saying, we have not got enough space. Because even though they were probably too heavily accommodated previously in terms of one person per desk, they've gone down to an extreme and now finding when people do come in, there's not enough collaboration space and there's not enough sort of workspace for people to be. So I think the pendulum has swung back a bit, back to reality. So I think all that's happened is it's accelerated businesses that needs to make that change.
Hopefully, Rob, you've never found the businessdesk.com to be that inflammatory with our language. I'm pretty certain that neither I nor my colleagues have ever written it's the death of the office. Quite the opposite. I think it's important about that bringing together of minds. But obviously, we've all touched on it. Business has changed because of the pandemic, and it's sort of changed our requirements. Every business became, to a degree, a technology business overnight because we had to utilize it, whether it was to service clients or to speak to each other. Are you seeing that change the skill set and the people you're looking for, and then also the spaces that those people want, perhaps? And Habiba, I'll go to you because you nodded at me at the wrong time there to give.
So if I think about the skill set change, yes, we are the obvious thing being the tech skill set. There's a massive shortage, and there has been for the longest time. But actually, this is I guess just exacerbated that. Because the ability to work and process data is a necessity for almost every job that we hire now at every level. So there's a huge demand for tech candidates at all levels, but particularly now, well, not particularly, but all the more now in kind of first line support, just because if that goes down for any of our organisations, it fundamentally impacts every employee at almost all levels. But then to add to that, communication, the meaning of communication skills has changed completely, because historically you will have found that on every job description and in every role it was always right up there as a core skill. But I think it extends much beyond now spoken and written and presentation skills. It now extends to being tech savvy, because all of our clients, or all the businesses that we work with in the Midlands, our own business, over the last couple of years, our day-to-day communication is now done via Zoom meetings. It's done via, we've got project management apps where we update our workload in real time. We've got group chats, WhatsApp, Teams, you name it. And so I think, the traditional meaning of communication skills has changed to this slightly less formal, but certainly a quicker way of working. I suppose, as an aside, one other skill set that's changed that has probably become a core skill that hadn't historically been that is probably just self-management, being able to work autonomously. It's less to do with the technological advances that we've made, but it's out there. Hybrid working has caused a real training and development. It's opened, I suppose, it's made us more aware that we need to concentrate on that as we're sending people to work from home for half of the week, but we've got to strengthen that particular skill for them, I'd say.
I could see you nodding along.
Yeah, I was just gonna add to that in terms of both what Rob and Habiba have touched on. We've seen, I often talk about with the exec board what worked in 2018, 2019, then didn't work in 2020, and then what worked in 2020 and last year actually it needs looking at and evolving for where we're at now, coming out of the pandemic. And so we're having to rethink the way that we communicate. And that also ties in with what Rob mentioned earlier around this kind of hybrid working and the office space being a physical space, but needing to look and feel and be different to what it was pre-March 2020, when it was predominantly, people had their desks, certainly where we were, people allocated their own desk space. They worked there probably 4 or 5 days a week. And that looks different. We're in a space now that we can't go back to that, or it's not what people are looking for. But there is still very much a need for connection, and that's that social side of bringing people back together. And that's definitely not gone. I know, Rob, you touched on it. That's definitely still a need. And we had a meeting last week, an operational board meeting, where we put out a discussion as to how do we make the on-site working purposeful and meaningful, rather than just say, okay, well, we do a hybrid working here, so it's a couple of days a week. Does that mean just coming to site and working and doing what you could do remotely, but from a desk at the office? And we all we don't have all the answers yet, but we kind of put the topic out. How do we make those on-site meetings purposeful, and what does the office space need to be adapted to help kind of meet that need, in terms of we're seeing a real need for more interactive, creative meeting space, which is something that we didn't have much of, because everyone had their allocated desks. So it's things like that we're finding practically that we're having to ask the questions and try and find the answers to. How do we make that space more creative and intentional, and meet the needs of what our employees are looking for right now?
And we, just on that point, I'll say, because I agree with everything, Faye, that you've just, our own company has gone through those kind of considerations, and we've changed. We've kind of gone from rows of desks, if you like, to making some of our workspace multi-purpose, almost living room style is one way I've heard it described. So we've got sofas, we've got high top bars, and just anecdotally, loads of my clients seem to have been doing, and this was pre-COVID actually, they seem to have been edging into that more interactive WeWork style kind of breakout area way of working. So Rob, I don't know if that's something you probably have more insight on that, but that's certainly something we've had to consider a lot.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, and when you look at what's changed, as I say, some businesses are already there. It is about collaboration, and I know, probably like most people, my college stuff I've never used, quite frankly. Most of my learning has been in an office environment. Now, obviously, a lot older than people on this call, and obviously technology's come in. You know, I was one of those days I had a desk without a computer that many years ago. But I think what was missing, and that collaborative space and those fixed desks, where the collaborative space comes in, is the ability, if you're a business that involves taking new people in, so those new people can be either new to the business, so they need to know what the culture is and understand what the project is, whatever you're working on. And when I refer to projects, that can be finance projects, it can be construction projects, whatever projects. But equally, if you're a younger graduate or a technician or whatever coming into a business, that's where your learning comes from. You know, and I know in the environment we're in now, where we don't have fixed desks, when you have a particular project, so you want to be able to collaborate together, and if you know, and you need to do that in physical presence, because you can't have technology on 8 hours a day and just hearing what people are saying. You know, you don't listen, and what happens is it's not about being nosy. It's about, oh, hold on a minute, okay, and then you intervene, or you make a comment, or you learn. And I think that technology, all the technology in the world, is not going to make that happen. And that's the bit that was missed, and that's where the productivity goes. Yeah, if you've got a task which you can do in isolation and take it away, and with the, you know, almost put your earmuffs on and do it, great. That's the time when you think, yeah, this should be working from home. If I've got to do the odd call, fine. But when you not need to start thinking about ideas, creative ideas, whatever type line of business, professional services, or whatever you're in, that actually is the bit where humans are much better being in the same space. And if you're in a job that doesn't require that, then I would worry about your job in the long term, because that's where AI is going to come in. Because if, you know, and I think that's the thing, imagination comes from bouncing ideas off people. So the whole workspace is entirely changed. The rigid desk situation's definitely changed. A lot of businesses are already there, a lot more collaborations, a lot more interaction. And, you know, and let's not forget the social bit of it. You know, there's nothing. One of my colleagues came into my office. He was on his own in his flat for goodness knows how many months at a time. We couldn't stop him talking. I had to stand in the top talking in the end. But he just, even though he's a very social media guy, the fact that he was in the same physical presence, and we mustn't forget that. You know, most people spend most of their life working. You don't want to always be chatting about work in the work environment, and you can't do that in the same world as you're sat next to somebody. And we should never forget that. Work needs to be an enjoyable place.
But it's fascinating, isn't it? Because you've hit the nail on the head. There was so much of that training of talent, whether old, young, new, old, that is learned through osmosis. You hearing people talking, how they deal with something, how they don't. And also that piece about, well, we spend a lot of time here, we've got to like it. I guess that environment around it, how important has that been when looking at your developments, Rob? You know, to think about the ancillary offers, so beyond the desks and the office space, the bits that, you know, the food and drink, because we heard Habiba talking about it before we started, you know, and Faye, the opportunities and the offer in Birmingham feels like it's thriving.
Absolutely. I mean, look, you know, switched on businesses, and I'm sure everyone will look at that, will look at the way they operate. Let's call it the office floor plate, and that needs to be very different. It needs to be an attractive place to work in. But actually, there's still that, you want that ability to walk out of that space, walk out your front door and go for a coffee or go for somewhere else. Habiba said that I think a good part of her team spend time in Albert Schloss. I'm not doing an advert for Albert Schloss, but we can see, you know, and I think that's where the city centres and the town centres can offer that, because it's that ability to go for breakfast with somebody. If you're in a business, as much as you may have a great environment, a great canteen, actually still feels better to go outside and go and grab a coffee with somebody, whether it's a client, whether it's a colleague, or go and grab lunch with somebody. If that's on your doorstep and it's a great offer, that makes a place. And many of the people that we've been talking to prior to the pandemic are driven around, you know, and as much as we've been involved in a lot of business parks, I personally have, and you know, they have their place in a different place. But actually what's completely lacking is that cultural thing, is that social engagement, is that ability to meet people during the working day for a coffee, but equally after the working day as well. So I think when we're, with the type of stuff that we do, we tend to, you know, like the Brindley Places, like the Paradise Circus, we tend to be able to activate the ground floor. But all cities have activated ground floors. You know, the bids do that with the Colmore bid. And I think that is so important. And that's what attracts people in. You know, it needs to be a destination. You need to encourage people to come back in. And there was an interesting, I'll stop in a second. There was an interesting survey about 6 months ago or 9 months ago. I think one of the, shall we open the lockdown, and I always find it's quite funny because it said what percentage of people actually wanted to come back into the office. And I think it was like, only about 20%. Same survey picked up, but what about the cafes and restaurants? Oh no, we want all those open still. So it's like, okay, so you don't want to come back in the office, but you want all the cafes open. But that doesn't quite work, does it, guys, really? Because where they're going to survive from. So I think the workplace is a very different thing to what it was a number of years back. It needs to be something where people look forward, dare I say, to coming into and enjoy the space.
And then that leads me on to that piece about the talent, and we touched on it, that osmosis of learning. Habiba, Faye, do you find that the talent that's there at the minute, whether it's young or old, because I think it's often when we talk about training and talent, it feels like we're talking about young people, but there is this opportunity to reskill and upskill, people who have a different level of experience. Do you think it's there now, or do you think there's a need for more training? And if so, what sort of training is it you think we need to focus on? Faye, you nodded first. You're going.
That's fine. I think it's a mix of both. I think that there's definitely been a move forward in terms of the offerings and people looking around that. We're finding, from surveys and talking to people and just market research, that learning and development and that upskilling is really important to people. Habiba, I'm sure you'll come on to quantify that. I speak to a lot of different recruitment partners and candidates, and as well as that flexibility and agile and hybrid working, it's about that learning and development piece. I think from a skill set perspective, we've definitely seen that we've had to evolve around technology, digital side of things over the last couple of years, and that's accelerated. We're finding at UK Fluent Direct, we've partnered with a number of different organisations, whether that be local colleges, universities, and we're finding an uptake on people that have been in roles and in careers and for some time that are now going on to self-develop in areas that they might not have thought about a couple of years ago, which is really great. And we're able to offer that kind of upskilling. We're also finding, that there's more focus around tech, digital, CRM, that kind of online e-commerce presence, which I'm sure, Habiba, you'll touch on in terms of the talent market and the war for talent in that space. But if we are, as a business, able to partner with organisations that are offering things like funded boot camps for people that may not have had the opportunity to go to university and study the skills that are going to be needed in the future in data, digital, analytical, engineering kind of space. So I would say, in summary, it's both. We're seeing an uptake on people being able to access additional funding qualifications, which is great. I think there's still more to do, and I'm seeing that particularly in my role at UK Fluent Direct around that recruitment piece and that talent piece in those roles that we've touched on.
Yeah, and Faye, I would agree with everything you've said, and I think the only thing to add to that, though, is given there is such a shortage of talent pretty much across the board at the moment, we are finding that a really high proportion of businesses are choosing to do as much of that training and development where they can in-house, that they're doing it in-house, but they're also they're paying for external courses to try and upskill their people. We've had, and the typical, what we're finding the most is you've got the more junior professionals are typically the most digitally proficient, but those are the individuals that probably do need the most support around self-management of time and prioritization of their workload. And then we've got more senior professionals that will already have been working autonomously, but they need support around the being a bit more tech savvy. And one of the biggest, just us as a recruitment company, and then I suppose knowing what some of my businesses are doing, we are absolutely inundated by requests to hire into and help businesses create their own in-house training and development team. But there is such a shortage. So it's that thing where there's almost every business I know is crying out for some kind of support in that area. And whilst they're trying to recruit that skill set, the training and development skill set externally, they're kind of making do organically with what they've got between them. Oh, Ben, you're on mute.
There's always one, and it has to be the guy who's hosting it, doesn't it? But no, it's interesting, that one, because you hear it a lot within the tech sector, but the training and development piece, that's a really interesting niche to hear. That actually, there's a lack of it there, and that's where businesses are looking to grow it themselves.
Yeah, there is. I mean, one of the biggest shortages out there from a skill set perspective will be, it's all around that technology space, but I'd put really very closely behind HR professionals, training and development, and a few other areas, but yeah, it's right up there.
And you know, you've all mentioned it. It feels like we are in the hottest labour market for quite some time, at least for as long as I sort of remember. You know, that means that businesses are having to compete. You know, and some bits going to come down to financial packages, but some of it comes down to the other bits that you've talked about, the culture and the physical space, Rob, that you've mentioned. You know, what is it that you think? And I'm going to do it to all of you. It's going to be a round robin question that you think businesses need to do or should be doing, perhaps, to stand out. And what is it you think people are looking for? And I'll start with Rob because he's unmuted first.
Okay, yeah. Right. I mean, for what we're seeing, and this is probably specific to our side of things rather than Habiba and Faye's, the HR departments, if you like, of the businesses that we're talking to, whether they're office, well, particularly the office occupiers, the big driver for them clearly is ESG. And I don't like using the word ESG because I think it's too widely used. Let's just be honest about it. Say, environmentally friendly buildings. You know, I won't go through all the badges that we're going for because there's so many out there that probably most of the public don't understand what they actually mean. But basically, sustainability, carbon, all those sorts of issues are now, I'm sure, Faye and others are seeing, and Habiba are seeing to be fair, it's not generational, but initially driven by the younger generation that are coming in, that are much, be honest, in some ways, proportionally aware of the impact that the environment they work in is having and how their business operates. So from a development specific and investment specific, everything that we're doing now, we are absolutely hitting hard how those buildings are built, which has been a major change in the last few years. That creates some significant challenges as well because the industry is not there yet, to be honest. There's a massive learning curve for it because how they are built and the embodied carbon, if you like. But equally, and what's the easier thing, we've already done this, is how they're then operated. And, you know, whereas before it was all about providing cycle facilities and public transport, you know, and we've done all that, it's actually then all the other key things, no gas in the building, all those things which people probably see in the headlines, no fossil fuels. So what we're seeing is the HR departments as businesses more and more now are saying, right, we've got to show that we are delivering on what we're saying as a business, and whatever business theirs is, whether it's a finance business, legal business, consultancy business, that also means in the space that we occupy, the landlord that we take needs to have environmentally sustainable buildings, both in terms of construction, but also for the longer term, because it's a big part of their carbon requirements. So that's one of the attractors that we're seeing. But again, I mean, I'm just going to repeat what everyone else has said: the location, convenience. I mean, there's one thing I just want to add to all this. And there's some of those city headlines: the cities are dead, the town centres are dead. And I know from our own son that he's not a car person, and he's just buying a flat because next to a train station because he doesn't want his car. And also the fact that he's much more driven around the fact he wants convenience. So even if you take into consideration the environmental improvements that makes, it is that fact that nobody wants to, a lot less people want to commute now. They want the convenience of the workplace. So that's where city centres, town centres are still, despite the headlines that have been out there, are still key for people for the long term. So I think that's another big driver as well for people.
Yeah, I was going to say, and I guess that ties in as well, Rob, with that flexibility and the whole hybrid. It's that convenience factor that we talked about a bit earlier on. From a employee perspective, ESG, CSR, corporate social responsibility, or there's many acronyms but from our perspective, we're finding. Your question was, Ben, what's important to people, given that there is a talent war going on, or we know that there's demand for talent in certain roles, and we're finding it is around that environmental and social factors, which from a HR perspective, our people strategy at UK Floor and Direct incorporates a number of things. But what we're finding that our people are telling us, it's around how they feel about working for the company, the give back in the social capacity, the responsibilities to the local communities. And it's something that we've always been focused on, but we've made specific steps, even just, the last couple of months into 2022, to think about as a business and as for our people, what are we doing around ESG? What are we doing for the local community, for charity? We've just launched something called employee supported volunteering. So again, UK Flow and Direct's gone from a small to a medium enterprise, but we're looking at things like that, which what we're finding is really helping with engaging people and ultimately that talent attraction piece, and then also retaining the talent that we've got in the business. Whereas, if we go back, I've been in the HR profession for 15, 16 years now. It was salary, it used to be years back. It was what, whoever paid the most in base salary, that's you got the talent. And that's, Habiba, I'll pass over to you now, but that's not the case. So it is around those things around environmental, social, corporate responsibility side of things.
Yeah. And I completely agree with that. That's probably been one of the most significant changes over the last couple of years, where I've noticed that for really the first time in the whole time that I've worked in recruitment, we've got candidates that will ask us what a company's ESG policy is, or they'll take an interest in the CSR policy. We've got businesses that, we're asking them, can you make sure that you can articulate what your policy is at interview stage, because the candidate's quite likely, depending on the level of the candidate, they're quite likely to want to know. And then we were asked this question a lot, but there's lots of things that a company can do outside of just remuneration. And so I guess shouting about whatever is important, making sure that they take a look at what their employees actually want of them, and including that into the ESG policy, it is right up there. We also say, if you can't, sorry, I have got to get my tissues out, unfortunately. I did say I was worried that would happen, but unavoidable. But we also say employee engagement is really up there. It always was to a degree, but never more so than now, because one of the things that we found around, particularly over the last few years, with candidates who approached us and said they wanted to leave their organisations, very often it was because they felt that they weren't engaged with, they weren't kept in touch with, and they were put on furlough. They've got some resentment built up around the way that they were treated during the pandemic. They didn't feel that they were heard or seen. And so I guess where you can't pay big bonuses or pay rises, there are initiatives around recognising your staff, making sure they feel cared for, making sure they're valued. And that's really always been very important in terms of staff retention. So that's a big part of the advice that we would offer to our clients. And then one thing that we've noticed some of the businesses that we work with have started to do, and Faye, I don't know whether this is something you can add to, but anecdotally, a lot of the businesses we work with have started to realign their benefits packages. So there's always some traditional benefits like dental insurance or travel insurance, for instance, that are almost part and parcel of a benefits package. And what we're finding is some of our clients are looking at their demographic of employees and changing them to things that might more directly impact their day-to-day. So, for instance, we're seeing things like a £30 Uber Eats vouchers per month, or supermarket shopping vouchers per month. And we've got, there's some clients that used to, as a standard, do free cinema tickets, and they're changing that to annual Netflix subscription. So just things that the employee can relate to in a meaningful way, rather than some of the more abstract or further removed travel insurance benefits, for instance. So yeah, those are the kinds of things that we're noticing are having an impact. Well, certainly when we're selling opportunities to candidates and we can give them things like that, they can envisage utilising those benefits in their first 3 months or 6 months of employment. Those are the things that are standing out to them.
It's interesting, isn't it, when we are in this hot labour market, that it's some of the softer things that, and it ties back into what you said earlier about places that we want to work in being social places. That I think the last 2 years of all the changes that we've gone through, you can talk about digitization here, there, and everywhere, but actually it's brought the social importance of work forward, whether that's going out for coffee or actually just feeling you're being part of that community.
Yeah, and on that, and Rob, I know you touched on it, and I think we found that's part of the swing that we've noticed with clients and candidates who thought they wanted as much remote working as possible, and actually they've shifted to wanting to come into the office more than they might originally have envisaged. And part of the staff retention piece is making sure that in the time that you have got physical time with them, including a couple more more social events, things to make them that connectivity between the employee and the wider team. Oftentimes that's one of the things that prevents people resigning, is when they feel interconnected with their colleagues.
And one of the things, just picking up on what, and again, probably overlapping what everyone said, obviously, I'm sure the well-being aspect, which has been around for a number of years now, but I think it comes to that, that location, that place. But that's a big, we have definitely got tenants that have upped their game in terms of the quality of the space. Let alone all the things we've talked about today, which is about collaboration spaces, because you can refurbish buildings and all sorts of things, and whether they're good on the ESG is another thing, but you have to combine that ESG with the well-being, because I think whereas you've seen some tenants that would, what I'd almost in our world would call secondary stock, both in terms of location and, if you like, that's we'll get on price point to the office because it's a bit cheaper there. The reality is, and obviously I'm talking about sort of the office side of these things, the office cost is tiny to compared to running a business. It's the easiest target, and it always used to be the easiest target for cutbacks. But then the negative impact is all the bits that Habiba and Faye come back was, but if you do that, are you going to retain the talent, the staff? And an extra few quid a square foot, and I'm not doing this as a sales pitch, but make all the difference between somebody. It's a good location. I like the location. I go into the space. I really like the look of the space. It's nice and light. It's bright. It's airy. It's it feels nice temperature in there and all that sort of stuff. That's part of what some of the tenants are now realizing, that don't be cheapskates and go and chuck people in some, let's be honest, about some 1960s office that just rows and rows of desks. That is a small price. That is a big price to pay if you start to lose staff, because recruitment staff is a massive cost to a business, and retention of staff is a massive cost to a business. So I think the quality of the place, the well-being is a big issue. So the whole thing about plants in the space and all that sort of stuff is a big factor to make people and to retain people, to retain good people. So.
Well, that leads me nicely on. I'm going to ask you all to put your sort of future heads on and do a bit of Mystic Meg look into the future. We've seen a big shift in hybrid working or agile working. What do you think's next? If we were having this conversation let's jump ahead 5-10 years time, what do you think's the next big change we're going to see with regards to the labour market and the way and where and how people are working? Let's see who wants to go first, because you're all looking at me going, I don't want to be the first fish. So Habiba, you're looking the most confident. We'll go with you.
Okay, I don't know about that, but I will. I mean, there's endless potentials of how things could play out. But I did have a think about this, and I guess if I just start with one of the obvious ones, automation is going to play will continue to play a huge role in the shift of the labour market. And so I think, but what that could mean is, I read I think a Microsoft study that said 85% of the jobs that will exist in 2030 we don't even know what they are. They don't exist as of this moment in time. But I think it will continue to cause a decline of mid-admin skilled roles over the coming years, which, and what we're already finding is clients are preparing for that. Our businesses that we work with are already preparing to move some of the more clerical work into data analyst type roles. And that's what we're expecting, the creation of more data analysts, machine learning specialists, big data specialists. And then there'll be the roles that exist as they are, even management roles, for instance, they'll continue to exist, but a big proportion of a typical management role will involve performance management, much of which can now be automated. And so we're expecting roles to take more of a human-centric approach over the coming years. And I suppose more roles will emerge where you really need to have distinctly human qualities. So we're expecting to see more sales roles, more HR roles. And then to counter that, one of the other things that we're expecting to counter the kind of the digitalization will be that purpose-driven piece that Faye's already touched on, but more companies will be adding layers of authenticity, if you like, to what they're doing. So we might see roles like chief trust officer, ethical sourcing officer, chief purpose officer, those kinds of roles. We're expecting to see a demographic change in the labour market. So more people will probably have to be working for longer. So we're expecting 4-generational working, growing diversity in the workplace, just because it's so intentional at the moment. Russia, Ukraine will have a huge impact in the short, medium and long term. So aside from just challenges depending on the long-term effects of sanctions or inflationary effects, supply chain challenges, cybersecurity is probably the single most prominent on all of our clients' agendas at the minute. That there's a massive need to strengthen businesses' cybersecurity, and that leads straight onto the skill set associated with that huge shortage in the market at the moment for that. Ukraine is. Oh, sorry, go on.
No. I'm just conscious. I've only got 5 minutes left, and but you for someone who said they weren't feeling very confident when I threw to you, you were well prepared.
Yeah, I'll stop. Go on forever, but yeah.
Faye, same question to you. What is it that you think is going to be the big shift or the next big shift we see?
I think going off what Habib has said, but from a thinking about it from a HR perspective, I think it's going to be. I think we're going to see a real balance or that office working, that need for connection continue to increase over the coming years. Out the back of the last 2 years, I really think that we're going to keep seeing that. Again, we've got to be thinking about how we be purposeful, we be intentional in what we do about that. But I think we will, if we could fast forward in 5 years, I think we will see workplaces vibrant and busy and lots of people in them. I think from a engagement perspective, we will continue to see people, candidates, employees that are asking the questions, what can you as a business do for me and why should I come and join you? And that's something I've certainly seen start to trend over the last couple of years. Again, going back, it would be that if you were offered a job, or there was interest in it, you would potentially go to it. Now, I think going forward, again, if I had a crystal ball, but I think it will continue to be that candidate market of why should I come and work for your company? What will that offer me in terms of my well-being, whether that's mental, financial, emotional, what's the environment like? What are my benefits and offerings? So I think we're going to see more of that off the back of what Habib has talked about around the tech and the skills and the roles. I think it will be very much still being a very candidate-driven, employee-driven. Why should I continue to work for your company? And tying that in with all the things we've talked around about ESG, equality, diversity, inclusion. So yeah.
Yeah, fantastic. And then last to you, Rob. You're having to think. Building the buildings these future employees are going to inhabit. What is it that you think they're going to be looking for, and what is it you're planning for?
I think really it's going to repeat a lot of what Faye's just said. Actually, I think there's going to be a lot more competition in the workplace. There already is, but I think that competitiveness is about having the right workplace and creating the right environment in the workplace. So all the things which we've talked about today, the whole well-being, the location of the workplace, the convenience of it, and obviously the ESG element of the workplace. So I think. Whereas when I first got my job many years ago, I just looked at the business. I didn't really care where it was, as long as I could drive there. I didn't really care what the office was like. It was all about the job. And to be honest, what does a job mean? I think the world has moved on enormously. I think where you're located, the type of environment you create, the way that you work within the social community. We encourage a lot of our tenants, we do it ourselves, about working with the local communities, but also with the business community. So I think there's going to be a lot more focus on the place itself, let alone the day of your business, is my view. And I think that's what we're hopefully trying to future-proof. If we're crystal ball gazers, very difficult. Infrastructure on all this technology stuff is immensely challenged because, buildings take 3 years. Technology can move on a lot in 3 years. So that's always our biggest challenge, which is a daily challenge, to be honest. So.
Fantastic. Thank you very much. And thank you to our panelists. It's certain that, the way we work has changed completely and actually in some ways seems to be going back to a very people-centric approach as it's needed for the competitive labour market that we're in. And as we create spaces that encourage that social interaction. Thank you very much. And I shall draw this session to a close. So, the next session is entitled Skin in the Game, the Rise of Employee Ownership Trusts, and that will be starting shortly. So, thankfully, my panel joined me just on time. So this session is going to look at the rise of employee ownership trusts, and as the title says, getting some skin in the game. According to the Employee Ownership Association, employee-owned businesses are more productive, more innovative, more resilient to the economic turbulence, and their people are also more engaged, more fulfilled, and less stressed, which, tying into the stuff that was just said about how important it is to keep and retain people, seems like it's quite obvious why we might be seeing a rise in them. With 730 businesses in the UK currently employee-owned, their economic contribution is is a significant part of the UK annual GDP and rising. So I'm glad here to have, 3 businesses who have gone through it over the last sort of 12, 18 months, and a member of the Employee Ownership Trust organisation. So first, I'd like to ask you all to introduce yourselves and answer the question, what you think is fueling this move. So I will start with Barry, because he's next to me on my screen.
Thank you. So I'm Barry. I'm head of marketing for Flowtech Industrial. We're an SME manufacturer. Sorry, what was the question, Ben?
It was, what do you think is fueling this move? So move to employee ownership trusts. Obviously, you've been going through that yourself.
Yeah, certainly. So I think the driver behind this shift is really employees and the workforce are in more control of how they work and where they work, and there's certainly a big awareness for business owners who are looking for a succession and an exit strategy that EOT is quite empowering for them, that they can retain the brand and the business that they've built up, and give the future opportunity to their staff.
Fantastic. Same question, and if you can introduce yourself, please, Oliver.
Hi everybody, hi Ben. So my name's Oliver Smith. I'm from the Employee Ownership Association. What we do, we campaign for more employee ownership in the UK. So I'll add to Ben's numbers. We're actually about 830 businesses now in the whole of the UK that are employee owned.
Apologies.
No apology needed. It demonstrates the growth. It's already gone up. And that's really, in the main, to answer your question, is around awareness, and also, which Barry's alluded to, around succession. But a changing mindset we're seeing from businesses that are looking to do better and are looking to engage their employees and show that reward, create the legacy, and use other slogans that are out there around better business and equality, etc. And employee ownership really fits into that. And so it's almost becoming mainstream in terms of a viable business option.
Fantastic. Same question. Introduce yourself and what you think is fueling the rise. Gary, please.
Yeah, hi, sure. So I'm Gary Ecob. I'm a corporate finance partner at Orbis Partners. So one of the vendors that's recently gone through one of these transactions, but where we've chatted about it amongst our team and explained it to others, have really sort of boiled it down for our business. It's about succession for those of us that were shareholders, and then it's really about retention and recruitment for the rest of the business and the employees, and really getting them motivated going forward. And I'm sure we'll come on to talk a little bit more about all of the different transactions, but that was the key focus for us.
Fantastic. And then lastly, to you, Dave, please.
No problem. Hello, everyone. Dave Hodgetts. I'm the Chief Executive of Talbot's Law in the Midlands. We converted to an employee-owned trust in November last year, so we're relative novices, I think, amongst this crowd. But I think for us, and I think the guys have talked through some of the main components. I think one that hasn't been mentioned is around, I suppose, the actual company structure and the benefit that brings in terms of the sort of market we're operating in. So in sort of the legal industry, there's quite a lot of acquisitions and consolidations in the market. And one of the things that we see as an added benefit is actually the protection that being an EOT gives us. And, all of our employees own the business. And, that's got huge value. And I think it does offer us a level of protection, in a consolidating market.
It's quite an interesting one, isn't it? Because we were talking just in the last session about how hot the labour market was. Do you think, and Oliver, you used the language there that they've gone mainstream. Do you think that employee ownership trusts give that USP to businesses to help attract and retain that talent during these markets? And you know, are you seeing that fast? Barry, having gone through this experience, you know, are you seeing a more engaged workforce?
So the Employee Ownership Association, we've got a membership base of about 550 businesses. So when we consult with them, when we talk to them and gather their insight, what they're saying is employee ownership gives them that USP against their competitors. It helps to retain the existing talent that they've got, and also it helps to, in that recruitment drive, to recruit the talent that they're looking for the future. Because what we're seeing, and I think all of us will be very aware, that the next generation of employees coming through are looking for something different from work, and looking for, you know, to use the phrase, equality again, and looking to be able to, where they can input and make a difference in the organisation. And again, an employee ownership enables them to do that. The stats are all incredibly positive, but I'm not going to sit here and say it's a panacea for every single business. And as soon as you become employee owned, you're going to retain the best talent you've got and you're going to recruit the best talent you've got. No, you've got to try and create that culture. But certainly for businesses that adopt that approach and be more transparent, the impact on their employees can be significant. And trust is one of those major elements. There was a recent YouGov poll that said results indicated that the society was looking at employee-owned businesses with more trust than those that aren't employee-owned. So it was a great incentive for them.
Barry, I could see you nodding along there with Oliver's points.
Yeah, certainly. What Oliver says resonates very well with myself and Flowtech. There's definitely been a great amount of engagement throughout the team. One thing that we feel empowered by is that it really gives us a future and an opportunity to make it the best we can. And it's quite exciting for us as well. I was saying just earlier that the USP really is quite new for me. And I think when I first joined the world of work, it wasn't an opportunity that I had. And I've been in that environment before where I couldn't really see a future for myself. So that's a real shift game. And I think with the younger workforce as well, it's a real hook for them, and really something that it's a USP in that they would have this exciting opportunity to really add value to an organisation. Rather than be a cog in the wheel, you know, and they can have input and they can see a future for themselves. So it's good for retention, definitely, and it's good for attracting new people as well.
And Dave, you sort of referenced the fact that it's played an important part in looking to the future and sort of not safeguarding, but yeah, keeping Talbots moving forward. You know, what difference has it made to the business? You know, since last November.
I think there's a few bits. I suppose from a financial point of view to our employees, I think there's a short-term and long-term benefit for them. So I think in the short term, being an employee-owned trust allows you to pay a certain proportion of a bonus tax-free every year. So for people at a grassroots level, that's really important and makes a significant difference to what it's been in previous company structures. So I'm really pleased that we're able to do that. I think longer term, our employees own the business. We're based in the Midlands. We're growing exponentially over the next sort of 3 to 5 years. So the value that each employee owns is going to grow and grow. And as a business, all companies are looking to invest, and eventually, it's something that will our company look to float or do something in 10, 20, 30 years time and realise the value of the business, and all employees would certainly benefit. And that's a massive staff, incentive to sort of retain staff. So I see that as a real benefit. I think from a performance point of view, we're starting to see real sort of shining lights now, in that we're sort of really passionate about employees owning the company, so they need to understand all facets of the business. So we need to really empower them with all business insights, so they understand what our customers think, what our employees are thinking, and how our sales are doing. And I think just making sure we're very transparent in that, I think people buy into it and are just more passionate about driving the performance forwards.
And going on to you, Gary, I guess, what is it, same sort of question to you, what are the differences you're seeing having gone through the journey?
Yeah, well, we are also relatively new to this, on the basis that as a business, it was December that we went through this. But also, as part of my day job as an advisor, I've been advising clients to go through this process anyway. So I perhaps came at this with a fair bit of knowledge and understanding ourselves. So we advise and help people do it ourselves, and thought actually this is a fantastic structure. We should do that for our own business. So whilst we're only 3 months into it, it feels like we understand it and see the merits of it, and certainly been shouting about these structures for a number of years. But probably like a lot of industries at the moment, it is very difficult to recruit. And this is sort of across the board. We've been trying to attract staff to our business since last summer and recruiting for growth into our business, and it's challenging. It's very difficult. There's few people out there in the marketplace. So once we got to sort of Christmas time and we're able to talk a little bit more openly about the fact that we're now employee owned, we suddenly found that this was a complete difference to attracting people for an interview. There was actually something quite different. Certainly amongst our competitors in accounting practices or corporate finance is very unusual. So it gave us a point of difference. And it has created that buzz in the last 2 or 3 months. It's just a lot more excitement about what we're doing. And we've made only subtle changes. Largely the business is being run the same, but the subtle changes that we've made is that there is a lot more engagement with other people. So the board of directors is now a larger board of directors, with making sure there's employee representation at all levels that would feed into that. And so we're going through a business planning exercise, which we sort of do every 3 to 5 years anyway, but there's much more engagement with the rest of the business now and more people involved. So those sort of subtle changes are currently still creating a real buzz and some excitement in the business. And as Dave said, the financial rewards and the enhanced rewards help. Of course they do. That excites people, but it's not just about that. It's really about everything else that we're doing. And we've seen there is a real buzz and focus for the future, and people thinking about how they can help drive the business for everybody's concern.
And go on, Oliver.
Ben, if I can just jump in, Gary used the phrase subtle changes a few times there, and I think that's an important point to note, especially for our audience, that maybe thinking employee ownership may be too far a jump culturally for their organisation. And for some, it is. But those subtle changes are basically, and Dave used the word transparency, you don't have to open the books of the business to everybody. You're not creating a complete democracy where one person, one vote. The leaders still lead the organisation. The owners own the organisation. The employees own the organisation. So there's a relationship between the main body and what's called the trust board and the employees that needs to be effective. And these are subtle changes. The walls are still going to be the same colour. The same people are still going to be working in pretty much the same jobs, but the culture changes to enable people to feel like they're owners. And therefore, if you have that feeling as an employee that you own the business, you're going to go the extra mile. You're really going to commit to your job. And hence, to your first point, you're more likely to stay in the role that you've got.
Which, and I guess that's a really important part. You've said it, Oliver, as say, coming from Gary, that subtle change. Are the things that you've learned through the experience? Gary, you said you were you were au fait with it because you've been advising clients to do it for a little while. But Barry, Dave, were there things that you learned going through the experience that you think, would be the thing you'd pass on to other businesses who are perhaps on the fence about making that leap? Sorry, go Barry first.
I think it's got to be right for your business. I don't think it's a decision to be made lightly. You've really got to analyse the pros and cons because there are other options. But by and large, my experience of it is fairly positive. It was right for us. It's the right thing to do. It was a good cultural fit. It kind of tied in very nicely with an update to mission statements and values and visions and a growth plan that we've got for the next 10 years. So we were able to align it with the actual changes to our business model. But definitely, if it's right for you, it's an empowering process to go through.
And Dave, yes, sorry, the lessons you think that others should perhaps take heed of.
I think for one of these things, it's a big move, to go to an employee-owned trust, and I think it's about doing your research, engaging with companies that have already gone through it, and I think through sort of Oliver and the association, they do lots of networking, to understand all the pros and cons of doing it and the right times to do it. I think there are different types of employee ownership models that you can look at, and I think there's very different ones that you need to spend a bit of time researching each individual model and seeing which one works best for your company. We've converted into a trust, and I think that certainly suits their model. But I think that sort of journey of sort of what sort of employees get today versus what it would look like in each of those models, and just mapping that out and just stepping back and thinking, what sort of culture and sort of values are you trying to drive in your business going forwards over that longer term. But I think it's something that will really generate long-term success. I think it's something that sounds like we're all on a fairly early stage of the journey, but there's really positive signs in the short term, and it's about sort of nurturing those for that longer term sort of benefit.
And Gary, you've talked about you advised businesses doing it before you went and did it yourselves. Dave pointed out you're all relatively early in the journey and you've had the uplift. With the businesses you've done it before, have you seen those uplifts continue? Have you seen that success?
Yes, yeah, definitely, absolutely, and it's gone down very well and continues to. And I think in terms of lessons learned, if that's the right phrase, or things to think about, I think everything that's already been said I won't repeat, but just adding to it, I think it's important to find the right time to engage with the people pre-transaction happening. So it's not a case of we're selling out to an employee-owned trust tomorrow. Congratulations, employees. In my opinion, it should be something that's much more inclusive than that, over a much longer period. And the employees, the trust representative, are really part of shaping the deal and shaping the plan and shaping the future at the same time. So that's perhaps one thing I would say, that's very specific to the specific circumstances of that particular business that's going through it, is when is the right time to engage with everybody, because you need to be certain, I guess, to a point that it can be done, but it still needs some work to do to get it over the line. So I think that's an important thing to take away as well, is how to engage that it can be a possibility and how you shape the deal together with the new business.
And yeah, Oliver, you touched on it with some of those stats that, well, my stat being out of date of 730 businesses now being 830. That, are you seeing more? What's the rate at which you're seeing this come forward? Are you, what are you expecting employee ownership stats to be, perhaps by the end of the year?
Well, at the moment, we're seeing 1 in 20 business sales is through employee ownership. 1 in 20. I mean, at this stage now, that's phenomenal for where the growth was historically, maybe when EOTs came into play in 2014. So as there is more awareness, and it is mainly in the SME space, which you can see from the speakers today. There's John Lewis that he's held up there as one of the major organisations, but actually they're out on their own in terms of their size. It's majority SMEs. So we were just this is inevitably going to just continue to grow and grow and grow for all of the right reasons that's all been cited right here. But I would say to any business thinking about what's next, what is next in their succession, consider employee ownership alongside a trade sale, a management buyout, or anything else, and just look at the feasibility. It might work for some, it won't work for others. It just needs to be considered amongst the business, what the business wants to achieve for the future, what the current owner is looking for, and also what's the best interest of the employees.
And Gary, I'm going back to you because, again, it goes back to that advice you were giving to corporate finance. Now, are you seeing more of those businesses and your clients come forward with the EOTs in mind, or is it that a harder sell, so to speak?
No, I think definitely one thing that's changed over the last year or two is when we're pitching to clients at the early stage and explaining what their options are. I would say, as of now, generally they are aware that it's an option, whereas 1 year ago they may not have been, and certainly 2 years ago they perhaps wouldn't have been. So it's talking relatively generically there from our own experience, but certainly there's lots of awareness. And so we tend to find, we talk to people at the very front end of their decision making. I'd like to find a succession route. I don't know what my options are. Can you help? That's normally when we get involved. And as I say, now people are fully aware that it's out there. So Oliver will be very pleased. But it's the message is certainly getting out, and there's a lot more press about it, and I'm finding owner managers are aware it's an option.
And I guess, you know, for a layman, and that is what I am in this instance. You know, how long is the process? You know, as you said, it's about finding the right time to start that engagement. Both Dave and Gary, and actually Barry, you all said that. You know, how long is that process from when you first start thinking about it till, you know, you're doing the deal in that sense? You know.
Shall I answer that question?
Yeah, go. Well,
yeah.
I'll go round you all, and you can all tell me your version of the story. So yeah, go Gary first.
Okay, I think if they're not raising any finance as well, that makes it an easier deal to be done at that point in time. So that can be, you know, in terms of the legal process, 3, 4, 5 months, depending on the complexity of the business, but 3 to 5 months is probably a sensible timing. I think the bit to get ready for the legal process, sort of need to get the commercial piece sorted. So, you know, what does the new board of the new business look like, and what's the strategy, and, you know, all of the sort of commercials, where's the business going, what's it going to look like? If that's all in place, then I'd say, yeah, perhaps 3 months to do a transaction. But the reason why the transaction may take anything from a year or maybe longer is because the business will go through a process of evolving through time and evolving its strategy. And as I say, if there's a finance raising as part of it as well, then that could also be a 3 to 4 month process that you would do at the same time as the legal process. But again, if you're not ready for that financial process, if you've not got the accounts ready and the model ready and the financials ready, that also may take longer.
Yeah. Dave, you said you know you completed it at the end of last year. How long did it take to get to that point? You know, when did you first start having those conversations?
Funnily enough, we were talking about that earlier. Then, when, as I say, Gary had shared, you know, how quick, you know, he was able to sort of push it through that journey. It took us between 1 and 2 years, if I'm being completely honest. And I think some of that is around exploring the different types of EOT models, and just making sure that we're selecting the right one. As you say, getting the right management team and trust structure in place. We were also obviously in the middle of the pandemic, so obviously there was a few stops and starts in there. But I think realistically, you know, a year is probably a realistic timeline. I have, you know, mentioned earlier about networking and just reaching out to other companies. So I have had other people reach out, you know, and just ask for, you know, questions and advice, you know, because they're thinking of going across to employee ownership. And they've got sort of longer term plans, you know, almost like a 3-year strategy where they've sort of got financial plans and timelines, you know, starting to be built where they want to convert, say, in 3 years' time. And I personally think that's probably the right way to go. It's something, it's a long-term ambition, you know, whether it's a succession plan or an exit, but it's something that you think through thoroughly, and drive real success through it.
And same question to you, Barry. You know, what was the timelines like at Flowtech?
Yeah, it was pretty similar. I think for us, the important thing, as has been said, was that how were the people going to look? How was the board structure going to look? So for me, I was brought in January of 2020, and it was very much I was the right fit for the company and what the vision of that was looking like. And so I was brought in for my marketing input, and then it was how the future leadership, I guess, or the board would look within that. And from then on, it was I kind of, I'd put it at a year time frame throughout 2020 and then into early 21 for it all to go through. But I think it's critical that you get your company structure right beforehand and make sure that you geared up before you start going down the application process.
And we talked about it again in the previous session. We talked about the rise of the softer parts of business. You know, the in social interactions, the doing good for the community. I guess, is that one of the big selling points of the employee ownership? The fact that you all feel part of that connected business model, Oliver. Is that what you think it ties into that wider cultural shift we're seeing?
Yeah, certainly. I mean, everybody's got their own values. They've got their own outlook and perspective on society, and being employee owned enables, in some regards, people to share those values, and then the business can reflect those going outwards. I would say, just in answer to the question of timescales, you've heard from 3 months up to 2 years, and really it depends on the complexities of that organisation and the steps it needs to go through. All I would say is, in addition, I agree with everything that's been said, is think about the communications. Once the decision has been made to move to employee ownership by the senior leadership team or the founder, take the employees on that journey with you in order to make it happen. That is the bit that can take a little bit longer, but it's all done for the right reasons if you do. Because at the end of the day, you can have a piece of paper that says you're employee owned, but if the employees don't feel like owners because it's been done to them, then you've got a challenge to create that culture going forward. So take those people on a journey, which might take a little bit longer, but it's definitely the best practice and approach people should take.
And then, I guess looking to the future, what is, you've all outlined it. It's crucial to the futures of your business. What is it that you're excited for looking ahead? And Dave hinted at it might be that they look to float or sell in due course and get make the money back from that. What is it that you think is driving it forward for you? And is it the same? Is it the exit at the end, Gary, or is it something else that you think is the opportunity?
Yeah, I think for our business, not necessarily about the exit at the end, but we've sort of felt like we've created some longevity for the business. So I'm approaching 50 at the moment. The partners and directors in our business sort of range in age from 33 to 45, I think. And the next level of employees that have got shares through the trust, some of them are in their 20s. So this business has got some longevity that will go way beyond my career in corporate finance, which is the exciting part about it. But we're expecting that it's there and it really stays as is for whatever the next generation of partners, directors and managers and the future of the business that's coming through want to do with it.
Same question then to you, Barry. What is it that Flowtech are looking forward to the future with now at the minute?
I mean, certainly for Flowtech, I mean, we talk about culture a lot, don't we? And that is really important. So we're very diverse. We're a diverse team, small team, but the diversity within it is really good, and we're inclusive, and that is the culture of our company. We're very supportive of one another, and actually, what I've seen is even more solidarity between us, and also a better opening up of communication. So we really do get involved with what the other team may be doing and get a more holistic vision and understanding of the business. And it's all about opportunity for us. It's all about the potential. It's our destiny. We can make what we make of it, and we get the rewards of doing so. So it's again all fitting in with some objectives that we've got, longer term growth strategies. So it's all a very positive experience for us.
And then I guess one for you, Oliver, that you talked about it being there's a real growth within the SME market of those businesses. Are there particular sectors or particular business types within that you're in industries that you see are far quicker in adopting this EOT model?
Really good question. So it can span most sectors. We see a lot of growth within professional services, because professional services typically around the people, and within that, the built environment. So architects, engineers, civil engineers, etc. Because it's about the people. They're people-facing businesses. The Architects Journal, they do a top 100 every year. 20 of the top 100 businesses in the AJ 100 are employee-owned. That growth is continuous. So definitely in professional services. More recently, we've seen surges within the construction sector, within media agencies. And I think really it comes from the snowball effect that we were talking about earlier on. If a business sees an organisation transition to employee ownership, and then they think, well, there's relevance there. That's within my sector. That business is a bit like ours. They can see the benefit. That can help trigger the awareness and the interest. And Ben, I didn't answer your question earlier. By the end of this year, I think we should be towards 1,000 employee-owned businesses in the UK. It's a stretch, but given the momentum that we have and the awareness that sessions like this create and advisors are creating themselves, it could be an achievable target for us.
That's an ambitious target, but as you say, achievable. And I guess then one of my last questions would always be, and this is one for you, Gary, Dave, and Barry. And I think I know the answer, but I've got to ask the question. Having been through the journey, would you do it all again? Are you certain you made that right decision when you took that jump?
Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
Yeah.
Definitely. Yeah.
Well, I realised that I was asking that question having had this conversation where we've just discussed quite at length all the positives of EOTs. But I thought I better just double check that none of them have gone. No, wouldn't do it. And then so the last one, if you can each try and think about what is the thing that you think is most exciting about having gone through the Employee Ownership Trust that you think might help Oliver's mission there to hit that 1,000. If we were to pass on one message from each of us to those businesses that are maybe wavering, what is it that you think is the reason? Well, the reason that businesses should do it and should be considering it. And we'll start with Barry at the top again.
I think it's really about inclusivity again and ownership, and that the future is in your hands and the success that you can have is unlimited. So it's a really exciting prospect for me and for Flowtech.
Fantastic. Dave?
I think it's the same. It's that sort of shared values and going on that journey where we can demonstrate, the business is going to go from X to Y. That benefit and value is going to be shared equally amongst all of our employees. It's hugely powerful, hugely motivational, and something that we're really proud and excited about.
Gary?
Yeah, I'd probably say a similar thing in a slightly different way. Absolutely, all about the retention and recruitment. Got to come back to that again, for the business, and getting all the employees sort of excited and motivated about the future.
Fantastic. And then I guess Oliver, what other support? You had Dave give you a ringing endorsement for the Employee Ownership Association's networking opportunities and things. What other support do you think businesses need or can seek from you guys, as well as advisors like Orbis Partners and their lawyers and everything else, in making that transition? What is the big hurdle?
It's research. So as Dave has alluded to, go and speak to other people. Speak to other people that have been there and have done it, and they can share their experiences. Get good quality professional advice to help you with that technical journey. Make sure that that advisor knows what they're doing. That is the best bit of advice. But yeah, speaking to other people in order to understand the pros and if there are any cons that are coming forward, so you can be ahead of the game and you can plan for that in good time. And your exploration of employee ownership, you're going to make an informed decision if you've done some in-depth research as to whether it could be feasible for your organisation. And naturally, the EOA is in a position to help anybody that wants to do any of that exploration.
There we go. Well, thank you very much to all my panelists, and thank you to everyone who's joined us. I think it's certain that employee ownership trusts are on the rise, and hopefully we'll all be checking those figures, Oliver, to find out if at the end of the year we hit 1,000. I don't think there's a reward for you getting it right, but there'll be a pat on the back or a pint with me at some point. But it's clear that employee ownership trusts they're growing, and they also offer a great benefit to the businesses that do them, as all our panelists have shown. So thank you very much to the panelists, and thank you very much to everyone who's joined us. That actually brings an end to the talent pillar of Invest Midlands. Starting shortly on the blue stage, my colleague Sam is going to be looking at growth of the life sciences sector in the region. So I suggest you go and join that, because it'll be a fascinating discussion and a massive opportunity for the region moving forward. And I do hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you very much.